Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's 1 hour later edition of X Vlog Live. I'm your host, Mr. BoomStick XL, and I get a chance. I'm again one of the things that I love so much about hosting and having so many podcasts on a weekly basis is I get the privilege of working with so many different personalities within the industry. And I'm very, very lucky to sit down with three very unique personalities, all representing their own brand in the most proper order. And of course, like in recent weeks, folks, we have some breaking news. Sony has once again not only lied to regulators, they are lying to the world. We have full on broken down dictation, if you will, of their claims against the Microsoft 10-year deal with Nintendo. They have a lot to say on it, but ultimately they claim that it's meaningless. It's a farce. And of course, one of the people that we have here today wrote an article for XboxEra.com. Jesse Norris, welcome back, dude. You obviously happened. Again, I want to thank you so much for joining us on such short notification, but you're here and you wrote an article regarding exactly the breaking news I'm talking about, and it states Sony is not amused by the Xbox Nintendo Call of Duty deal, and they say that it's meaningless on Switch because, well, Switch is for children. But we got some new information, and it seems very suspect that Nintendo, for the first time, would give us the age demographic of who plays on Switch, and it's quite shocking. Jesse, how you doing, brother?
I am doing quite well. Thank you for having me on.
Well, it's great. It is great to have you on. Obviously, we're gonna get into your report. Obviously, I got this this was originally posted on Reset Era. And obviously, you got to be really cautious about making podcasts on about something that's on Reset Era, because sometimes it's not checked. But when I saw and read the article from Xbox Era, I felt more comfortable of making this the opening salvo. But Luke Steele, first of all, brother, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, we did the show 1 hour later to be able to work with Luke today, because in the UK he gets out of work a little bit later. Luke, are you surprised by the recent dealings with the Nintendo X Microsoft deal, and now hearing Sony calling it misleading?
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for having me. First of all, yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. I think going back, I guess, a day or two, I was pretty surprised with Microsoft, coming out and openly saying, we're entering into a 10-year commitment with Nintendo, and they'd also approached Steam as well, about the same commitment, effectively.
Yeah, what was even more shocking than that is Gabe Newell's response.
Yeah, he was just like, not interested. Like, we don't need it. It was quite funny, actually. It's typical Gabe Newell, I think, kind of nonchalant. So that was really interesting, and I think it speaks to a lot of different things that's probably going on in Microsoft at the moment, and correspondence with regulators, which we can probably get into. And then Sony's kind of unofficial / official response from MLX is interesting in a lot of ways. I'm looking forward to talking about it. I don't think their response is too surprising, but it is interesting.
Yeah, you know what? Look, I said this before. I'm just a podcaster. I'm obviously a retired New York police officer, so I don't really have a business degree, but I do have something called common sense. And I think that even though I do know the industry back, forward, and then reversed, because I've been a part of it since I was a kid, and now I've taken a bigger stab at the industry as a whole, of running, an entire podcast that runs 5 shows per week. I do have a vested interest, and I do read a lot, so I do have an understanding. And one of the things that continues to shock me is that it appears that Sony believes everyone is stupid. They seem to have this bully mentality that they are not wrong. They are always have to be the lead conversation piece. Getting quite annoying, to be honest with you. And at some point, there's got to be regulators out there that may not know as much of the gaming business as I do, but they have to take the time to realize that this is complete BS. I'm sorry, but before we get into it, I got to welcome in Retri, who's joining us for the second time this week.
Yes.
He is obviously the owner and operator of Game Pass Daily, your best at number one source for all the news and opinions on Game Pass. Retri, how you feeling?
That's
brother?
right. I'm feeling good. Here to discuss. Obviously, the topic changed a little bit, at least in the beginning. Sony being Sony, nothing really new here. They just blatantly putting out lies on the internet. It is, like you said, it's kind of amazing to me that they feel comfortable saying this sort of stuff with their PR. It's odd. It's exact opposite of kind of Microsoft's approach on how to handle things. So it's going to be an interesting show today. So
well, you know what? Let's get right into it. What we're doing for today. Again, two topics, two major conversation pieces. Once again, discussing openly the Activision Blizzard deal, which is slotted to not only be the biggest tech deal in history, but it is the biggest deal for Microsoft proper. When that deal ultimately gets approved, Game Pass subscribers are going to be extremely wealthy when it comes to content, not only future content, but past content that is eventually going to make its way to Game Pass. The report that we're going to talk about, it was posted today at 9/11 this morning. So it was only a couple of hours ago. This new internal report comes from the way of MLex. And he is obviously someone that is on Reset Era. Obviously, Xbox Era did a story on this, along with everyone else is now starting.
Itis is the guy on Reset Era, and MLex is their like a news and reporting marketing company.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. I did not know exactly what that was, so I appreciate it. So to say that there is legitimate belief behind what is being said and what has been written and posted, I'm comfortable in now going out of my way to put Sony in the spotlight. I think Jim Ryan and Sony Interactive Entertainment are liars. I think they are industry bullies. I think that they do not want to work for their daily bread, as you will. They have had many years of sitting on their throne and getting fat on Call of Duty. We have seen some very, very questionable tactics in regards to straight up misleading regulators, calling their own studios, their own world-renowned studios, not good enough.
Poor Bungie.
Yeah, right. Poor Bungie, who was purchased for $3.6 billion with zero kickback by any regulator. Seem to now be one of many studios thrown under the bus by Jim Ryan, who says that their own studios can't make a game as good as Call of Duty. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the breaking information that I literally have in front of me, and here it goes, folks. According to MLex, they say this: Sony has criticized Microsoft's deal to make the game Call of Duty available on Nintendo should its $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard be approved by regulators as smoke and mirrors. I continue. Activision Blizzard could supply Call of Duty to Nintendo today, but it doesn't, because Nintendo's, get this folks, younger audience is not interested in first-person shooters, and a previous version of the game on its console was a commercial flop. The arc critic of the deal says, again, this is they're the main opponent of this, according to MLex, and it continues, folks. Instead of being a logical business decision, the licensing agreement is a tactic designed to make Microsoft, whose acquisition has drawn concerns in the EU, UK, and US, look cooperative with regulators, the argument goes on to say. Furthermore, Nintendo Switch could not run Call of Duty easily and may never be able to, Sony argues. Developing a version of the game compatible with the Switch could take years, making a 10-year licensing deal meaningless. And finally, it is easier for Nintendo to enter into such an agreement, Sony says. Nintendo doesn't need to worry about equal treatment for its subscription service or cloud gaming services, as those are not areas where it currently competes aggressively, the argument goes on to say. And I'm going to say this before I let anyone else speak. Pardon my French here. This is complete bullshit. Every single word of this is BS, folks. Right now on cloud, if you want to play Resident Evil 2, 3, 7, or 8, they run perfectly via the cloud. No problems whatsoever. So if Microsoft were in fact to release Call of Duty, let's say next year, they could run it via the cloud, unless of course Microsoft is privy to the next hardware that Nintendo is expected to release, that is expected to run as well as like a Series S. So a Series S could run Call of Duty, so could the next Nintendo Switch, whatever it's going to be called.
All right.
I want to first go to Jesse Norris on this because you did the story, and then I'm going to bring everyone else into here. One of the things that we learned on your article is a report from Shack News. Now, Nintendo, if you thought Microsoft was coy with their numbers, folks, Nintendo is even more secretive. And you can call it a coincidence. You can call it strategic marketing. You can call it these two companies standing arm in arm, expecting Sony to come out like this. Well, a report was published on shacknews.com where Nintendo has detailed for the first time ever, folks, their age demographic for Nintendo Switch users, folks. And I'd be happy to tell you, I don't know what kids they're talking about. According to Sony, it's a kid's machine. Well, according to Nintendo's provided documents, the young adult aged that make up the biggest share of the Switch's users are the age of 20 to 25. That is the biggest user share margin for the Nintendo Switch, according to Nintendo's own recent reports to Shack News. This is a big deal because this contradicts everything that Sony is saying about Nintendo being for quote-unquote children, and that these poor kids, don't want to play Call of Duty. I call it BS, but Jesse, I'm interested to get your opinion on this.
Yeah, so that report is actually about a month old that Nintendo put out. I linked it in the private chat if you want to put it in chat. Even.
Yeah,
it's a PDF. It's hit again. I remember ZHugeEX originally pushed it out, and it's like, oh, surprise, the Switch is actually young adults mainly and not kids, which has been known about now for a full month, yet they still pretend it's a kid console that can't do games, yet runs Doom, the new Doom. You can port down. The Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 runs on a base Xbox One and a base PS4, which means you can port it down and get it running close to 30 on a Switch. Like, it's not impossible to make it. Future ones that might be next gen only, yeah, maybe. But Warzone 2 runs on a Switch. Could run on a Switch because it runs on a base Xbox One and a base PS4. It's not going to be a great experience. Like Fortnite is by far the worst on Switch, but people still play it there for the portability. They're going to have a new hardware that comes out. I doubt it's fully Series S just because, boy, you would need a battery like this big to try and power it just for an hour. They got to get the TDP way down, but they will, have DLSS in it most likely and all these types of things. So yeah, I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't port future Call of Duty games to Switch. And it's weird. It feels like people talk about arrogant Sony, especially with the PlayStation 3 and all that. But for them to sort of speak for Nintendo on this and speak for Xbox on this, and that rubs me in a really weird way. Like it's just They are bullies. They have always been bullies in the arena, and now they're just trying to bully, but it's with a really bad argument that also doesn't hold any weight legally, because it's not about, is Xbox going to hurt Sony for regulators? It is about, is it good for consumers?
Right. That regulators, and please, I'd like you to kind of just reiterate on that, because it's somehow or another, this whole transaction has been lost on workers. It's been lost on consumers.
Well, and it keeps getting pushed in the media, where people like gamingindustry.biz, run by Chris Dring, and he had a whole long thread that was before this report got publicized, which was pretty much just reiterating almost every step of this report, saying, oh, there's people who don't like it. It's like, it's almost like they have a group of people that they send their talking points out to from Sony. Those people just take it and regurgitate it. And I mean, we saw that that's what the CMA did. They just regurgitated Sony's talking points in phase 1 in their determination to go to phase 2. And now they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, well, no, what you're saying holds no weight, because that's what Brazil ended up doing with Cade. And like, Microsoft is already saying, we will give you all of these concessions. You don't have to fight for them. It's the only things that could hurt Sony. It doesn't actually hurt, like, the only thing that could hurt gamers is losing access to stuff they might have otherwise. But even then, the regulators' jobs isn't to keep the market leader in the market lead. Their job is to, what is best? Does this hurt the industry as a whole? Does this hurt the consumers in that way? That's what matters. Is we worry about consumers. We don't worry about something 20, 30 years down the line, like even when it comes to the cloud. It's every argument that they have put forward seems really bad and very easily countered, which is surprising, because I'm sure they have extremely expensive lawyers. Yep. So I'm almost at the point where I'm like, they just know what's going to happen here, and they are desperately pushing any way they can, and then trying to have people in the media help push that along. But it's not working at all.
Yeah, it's you know what, the best word that I could use here, ladies and gentlemen, is it's absolutely pathetic. You know, I know someone's going to take that as, oh, you're being, you're just being insulting. No, it's pathetic, folks. We have heard from multiple industry bigs like Zelnick of 2K. We've heard many comments recently from Gabe Newell. We've heard from other areas, from other publishers that feel that this is a big nothing burger, that Microsoft getting involved with ownership of Activision Blizzard is not going to hurt competition. It's going to be good for consumers. Heck, it's going to be good for workers, to be honest with you, simply because, well, workers now are going to be unionized. And Microsoft has taken a neutral stance on unions. It is the first time in gaming history that developers of games are going to have a seat at the big table when it comes to, crunch and rights and pay. We're seeing what's happening right now with ZeniMax and their QA testers, which are some of the lowest paid employees in gaming. They are now sitting down with the CWA to have a defense force for them, so they won't be crunched, and they will not be working harder and getting paid less. And this is good for gaming, and this is going to bring major changes. I am literally shocked, Jesse, that anyone on their legal team, meaning Sony's, would put out this rubbish. Like, it can be defeated extremely easy with not even having a major, open door picture of the industry. A lot of this seems to be common sense. And one of the things that a lot of us in our circles took like a real step back is when the CMA, said that Nintendo, because they make, family friendly games, they don't consider them as counting as a part of the industry. And when you consider
what's Bayonetta then?
Yeah, what is
that? A family-friendly game?
No,
I'm real curious to see if Xbox and Microsoft submit the thousands of hentai titles you can find on Nintendo eShop. Exactly. It's not a family platform. They have a lot of family games, but they have a lot of everything. That's sort of the point that people really like, is everything gets ported there. It's not just kid games.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Luke, let's bring you in on the conversation, brother. But before I do, I got to catch up on the super chat that popped in here. And if I missed you up front, I'm gonna go to YouTube and pull it up right now. Highlander 001 drops a very generous $10 super chat. Says, "Hey, Boom, great panel as always. I noticed that Sony's YouTube channel was talking about the deal when they think it's in trouble. I have never seen Hogue Law on any Sony channels. The truth hurts." Yeah, I mean,
Good point.
I mean, yeah, it's the truth. If you want to hear really good insights, besides listening to what Luke Steele has to say, definitely check out Hogue Law, who's about to cross 110,000 subscribers on his incredible YouTube channel. But Luke, this statement from Sony is at best laughable. I find it to be hilarious that we have all of these, demographic numbers that came out a month ago, which I didn't know, because again, I just saw that today. And the demographic for Nintendo is not like, ages 6 to 10. It's 20 to 25. 20 to 25-year-olds are playing Apex Legends. They're playing, any of your free-to-play Fortnites. They're probably playing Call of Duty Warzone right now as we speak and enjoying the heck out of it. These are that's college student and young adult age people playing on Switch. I'm sure that if there was an option for these this demographic of players, they wouldn't mind playing on a Switch because, well, they play on it right now.
Apex Legends does really well there.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. It kills on Switch, as a matter of fact. I'm interested to get your opinion on this recent development with Sony this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, just to give some context maybe to MLEX, because I think it probably helps in general, but they are a regulatory insight publication effectively. They're part of a broader legal publication called LexisNexis. So I use them sometimes, for example. And so MLEX, that what Sony have quote unquote said is not like an official line. It's MLEX having, sources effectively and being able to corroborate what Sony's views are on this. So it's not as if Sony PR has come out and approved this to go to MLEX. It's just slipped out, right? But nonetheless, it's still broadly reflective of what Sony think. So that's quite important. And I mean, yeah, look, some of these arguments are really, really tenuous. Naturally, they're going to be because, Sony's job at the moment, at least in terms of regulators, is to just keep up, the kind of mental pressure on regulators effectively, which is to say try and reinforce the arguments that some regulators like the CMA and the EU have already made in their phase 1 decisions. So that's all they're trying to do. They're not trying to put forward new arguments, and you saw that, I guess, in the issues statement response that Sony did to the CMA, that 20-page document, where it was kind of like a pat on the back. Yes, CMA, we agree, with everything that you've said.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous, but yeah, you're absolutely. It was considered a pat on the back, pat on the ass, whatever you want to call it. You know?
Exactly, and that's a pretty, if you were a third party going into this sort of stuff, that's a pretty common approach from my experience. That would, because you're just trying to sow the seeds of, continue to sow the seeds of doubt in a regulator's mind about this, right? You're not trying to, convince them of new things. You just want them to believe a few things, right? So that's kind of what Sony are doing at the moment, and that's what they'll be doing to most regulators. So when this kind of not statement as such, but this information came out, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, their arguments don't surprise me. I do think the bit about Switch being for children is pretty silly, for the reasons that have already been elucidated. That if you look at the demographic of Switch owners, it's actually skewed towards adults rather than children. I think a better argument probably for Sony would have been that the Switch isn't a place you go for first-person shooters generally, and I think if people had multi-platform owners were given a choice, they wouldn't pick their Switch. to play a demanding, high-intensity first-person shooter. So that's a bit of a weird argument. I get it, why they've done it, but I don't really buy it. The bit that I do agree with Sony on, one particular bit, is the bit that really I agreed, I had the same independent thought on a few days ago when Microsoft came out about these commitments, which is to say that I think that's quite reflective of Microsoft's worry about this deal in terms of regulators at the moment. And, I personally don't believe that they had a real strong intention to bring something like Call of Duty to Switch before this started getting into the weeds with regulators. And I think what they are doing is trying to use this as a move to say, look, we are very open to making concessions and to bringing this game and other games to a broader base of consumers. That's really important to us. So I kind of agree with Sony on that bit. The other bits, less so, obviously. And, the argument about, Switch, it being impossible to develop a Call of Duty on Switch. I mean, it's never impossible, obviously, as for the reasons that Jesse said earlier. Like, it's not like that's an impossible task. And I think Sony very coyly avoided the idea of, what you mentioned, Boom, which is you could bring it to the cloud anyway, even if it was impossible to run it on the Switch. Natively, you could bring it to the cloud, because that works on Switch. So it's an interesting view. It's the view I would expect Sony to take. It's the view they have to take almost from a business perspective, because they're trying to protect their own vested interests in this. I think it. Let's see if it continues to work for regulators, right? Like the CMA and the EU.
I do think there was one thing where right from the beginning, Phil, in his real big PR marketing push, when the deal came out, started talking about getting their games on Switch.
That was I'm glad you brought that up, because I literally was going to say that one of the first statements is that we intend to bring this to Nintendo Switch. People laughed.
Yep.
Yeah.
The whole Play Everywhere initiative, basically.
That's right, yeah. But there are statements that are, you said it, PR statements. They're not binding.
No, they're binding now because the contract has officially been signed.
Although we don't even. I mean, it's a commitment. I'm not.
It's a commitment. Sure. Yeah, that's not a contract though. Those are two very different things.
Yeah, two different things.
I thought it was reported that they actually signed a 10-year contract, not committed.
It's been inconsistently reported, I think, has been the problem.
Valve was like, no, we don't need to do that. But they pretty much came out and said with Nintendo that they had come to an agreement with them. What that agreement is, what it says, who knows?
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Look, at the end of the day, I still believe this deal is going to go through. Microsoft has not dug their heels in the sand. They have been forthcoming with this deal. They have said that they are willing to work with regulators to get the deal done. They have been working with regulators across the globe. This goes for the EU, this goes for the CMA, and this goes for the FTC that was supposedly going to vote on it today. As a matter of fact,
yeah, it would have been a few hours ago.
Yeah, and what's interesting is there's been no report that they are looking to sue. Normally, something like that would have dropped at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time when business starts, especially for Wall Street, because they're required. This would have tanked stocks. It would have been, everyone would have been reporting on this. We know that Brad Smith was on his way to Washington. We had reports from several people that Bill Gates actually went to Washington to sit down with regulators.
And it is weird. The FTC, they don't approve. They don't
approve. They just
not do, so you may never hear anything.
Right, but I think that what again, you can say it. There's two ways to look at this. It's either concerning, or or there's nothing that they didn't have a problem with it, because
if you look at the FTC's recent history in court cases, you wouldn't be that concerned either, because they lose a lot.
They're on a losing streak for sure.
Yeah, they are. She's Lina Khan as leader of that outfit as head chair of
They're
the
trying.
FTC has lost 3 major court cases, and badly.
Decades of eroding the laws surrounding protecting this type of stuff has definitely come to fruition.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. And I hate to say this, like I said, I don't know her personally. She was appointed by the president when he was elected. Obviously, she has skills. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been, appointed this position at the age of 33. She is definitely kind of young.
Yeah, she got something to prove. You know what I mean?
She definitely, but that's the short-sightedness of Lina Khan. I think that yes, she's an intelligent woman, no doubt about it. She's in a position because she's probably earned that position. I don't know a lot of her history, but I can simply say that her short-sightedness of looking to pad her political career by simply because she's gone on record saying we don't care about going to court and losing. You see, that's a problem, ladies and gentlemen. That's a problem because she's spending our taxpayer dollars.
I don't care if I burn your money.
Yeah, I don't care if I burn your money. So, and I saw an open opt article in one of the local the national papers where they said that if she had been in charge of an actual business, she would have been removed from power because she was losing the company millions.
Oh, you can't run government like business, though.
No,
government can't be focused on making money at all.
No, but what it's supposed to be focused on is us, the people, right? We matter.
Honestly, with how big corporations are getting, I do get that side of it. It's just we went so long with the government being extremely pro-corporate and making laws for that it's just like it's a very big ask to finally push back against it. So I get the sentiment. Listen, it's a losing fight.
It absolutely is a losing fight. At this point,
unless you ask Facebook, because that's what's scary. That's the only thing that scares me is the human element to this. The biases absolutely exist. We've seen it, and I'm afraid a little bit. I do think this is going to go through, but with what concessions we've seen, what happened to Facebook, and there was.
Facebook is mustache twirlingly evil.
You're right. But if you're looking at it, it should have passed, right? If you're looking at it of what is right and what is wrong, they should have had the VR should have slid right through, no issues. In my opinion, I think a lot of people's opinions, Facebook should have been fine with that. So a lot of people, when they killed that, were kind of scratching their heads, going, "Dang, are they going to come after Microsoft, and the ABK deal as well?" Maybe that's just. Me being a consumer and ignorance, I don't know.
No, you have every right to be concerned. Obviously, this deal is not a slam dunk either way. It's not a slam dunk block, and it's not a slam dunk to go through. There are concessions that are going to be made. Microsoft is doing everything in their power to sit down with regulators to say, listen, what do we need to do to make you comfortable? What can we do to make this a deal that you're willing to pass, that you can go and sleep, sleep comfortably at night?
I do think it's going
a lot
through.
Of a lot of their talk has just been these will be the concessions essentially. Like we'll do 10 years. We didn't plan on getting rid of it anyways.
Right.
We'll put it on more things. We'll do everything because other than that, you don't have any arguments about how this hurts consumers, which is the main point.
Yeah.
Right.
So the only thing right now is, we get Sony's crying really bad. And I don't know if you saw the other article we did, Boom, but Phil went on a podcast and was pretty much just stating the only one against this is Sony.
Oh, no, you're talking about the one with the kid. What's the name of it? I have it in my DMs over here. I listened to it this morning. It was 28 minutes. It was phenomenal. It was from the other day.
But that was by far the most aggressive he's been in just
you know what he said in this. Again, I'll add this article. You know what? Let me just pull it up so I'm just not shooting from the hip here.
You could listening to that podcast too. He was just, you could hear it in his voice, how sick and tired of explaining this stuff over and over again. And just like the pushback from the CMA.
Yeah, because they know the regulators aren't us and they don't know the business yet.
Right.
And so they have their entire thing. And like Kotaku's like, oh, they got this weird agreement with Nintendo. Like, no, you understand it. So it's weird to you. But the regulators do not understand this. So Microsoft's spending tons of time and effort educating them on it because the only company that's really crying nonstop is Sony. And they keep hearing those same arguments regurgitated back to them by regulators who Sony has already gone to and cried.
Mhm.
Yes. I actually have it in front of me. The name of the podcast is called Second Request. You can find it at thecapitalforum.com. I will add this 28 minute and 32-second interview to the show notes once this goes video on demand. If you want to check it, it's listed as Microsoft/Activision with Xbox CEO Phil Spencer. This was done on December 6th, 2022. Again, it was a phenomenal listen. One of the things that Phil, it was very spicy.
It was really good.
And one of the things that he said,
Definitely
Retri, which I thought was pretty interesting, and of course I want to get your opinion on this utter nonsense from Sony that was
Sure.
posted. He said that Sony, as the market leader, does its best work to make Microsoft smaller so they can remain market leader. That is a fantastic point because Sony, in fact, has done that. They have done
third-party deals
after deal after deal to hold content away from Xbox. Exactly what they are complaining about. And see, that, folks, is why I get fired up. And like I said, I'm in an apartment. If I had a studio, I'd be yelling at the top of my lungs because I again, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And everything that Sony has done to consumers, and that is me, is wrong. They continue to have a bully-like mentality. They go and they do these things, these raising of prices and charging for this, that, and the third, and it's been unchecked. And they have
and
been
that's
the
their
leader.
argument.
Yes.
Their argument is that Xbox might do this, and that's what I see from a lot of people in the media. Is if Xbox becomes the market leader, it'd be really bad. They might raise their prices. I'm like,
so weird.
The market leader just did that. They did an unprecedented raising of their hardware in the middle of the generation. They raised at the beginning of the generation, alongside Take-Two and others. They upped their prices by $10. They've raised the prices of their subscription package. Like they've raised every price already.
And no one lifted a finger. And why aren't the regulators? Why aren't they on that? It's so odd.
It's competition.
It is odd.
I mean, it's not. There's nothing wrong with it. But that's what makes it really weird. That it's what Sony is trying to use as their argument is look at all these things we did as market leader. If they become close to market leader, they might do them. And it's like, well, that's also not what's supposed to be regulated so much as in you're already doing this and no one's had a problem with it. So why would it then be a problem if Microsoft did it? Which they haven't actually ever shown they do.
Right. And you listen, again, I'm literally going to add it right now while I get a Retri's opinion about this because it is a great listen. It's 28 minutes. One of the things that he specifically talks about, because the interviewer asks him about the raising of prices, he said that it was a decision, and it seemed that me the lesser of two evils, or the lesser of three evils, is what he says. He doesn't say it specifically like that. He says, listen, we didn't raise our console prices, and we didn't raise Xbox Game Pass, but we did find it that because of the way business is changing, and, in order to maintain these monster AAA games, we decided that the best course of action out of the three was to raise the games to $70 like everyone else has done already.
Right. I mean, he's saying the cost basis. I mean, he did a very long... Phil is the master of PR. He is so freaking good at it because he gave a very lengthy answer to that. And really, you could have summed it up in 2 words, and that was cost basis. Basically, he's just saying that everything costs more. Unfortunately, I love you, Phil, but it's a BS answer. It's bullshit. Because those same exact games with the same exact cost basis were going to cost $60 this year. So we
talked about that the other day on the Xbox Factor podcast. We were all against the price increase. We were all definitely in favor of Microsoft potentially saying, "Hey, listen, we promised to deliver these 3 games in 2022, and unfortunately, we didn't. We couldn't do it because of whatever. They just weren't ready. Next year, they're going to be $70. I think they should still all be $60.
Yeah, I mean, we know that's not going to happen. I agree with you, and that was a really good point on the last podcast that we had. I don't think that's going to happen.
It may or may not happen, but if we want it to happen, then we got to tell them. We got to tell Microsoft.
That's true. I mean, Umbra did bring up a good point, and sorry to interrupt, in that podcast, saying that one of the reasons he thought that it was getting increased in price was because of the ABK deal, and Activision already has their prices set at 70. So if the deal passes like Q1 or Q2 of next year, which it's supposed to, then it would be a little weird with the influx where you have ABK, and Blizzard, and all their games are 70, and everything else on Xbox is 60.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
If I have to be honest, I think it would have happened this year in the exact same way, where they would have come out before they put pre-orders up. Like, we would have heard about it back in
like
E3.
The price hike. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think that we might get release dates and pre-orders tonight, which is why they said it a couple days ago.
Yeah, rip the Band-Aid off. That's a very, very.
You know what? Listen, I have a lot of super chats to get to, but I will do that before the next topic. We have I cannot believe this, folks. This is a new podcast. I've never seen numbers like this before, folks. We're closing in on 600 people live on the air. That
bring them in.
Hit that like button, guys. Hit it.
A big thank you for hopefully a lot of new viewers. We are on the hunt for 12K. We are just under 500 away. And I don't think we're going to hit it because the end of the year is right around the corner. But I'd love to give it a good run for its money. And if you are enjoying the content, if you're enjoying the opinions, if you enjoy the tenacity that I have for the industry and the 5 live shows I do Monday through Friday, I'd ask that you consider subscribing. But Retri, I want to go to you now regarding this recent, this information that has been brought to our attention. It is, of course, not sanctioned by SIE or Sony Interactive Entertainment, but we do have it on good authority, on a good source, thanks to Luke and Jesse explaining that to us. This, to me, they have the audacity to say that the deal, a 10-year deal with Nintendo, is smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
When they are the master manipulator, the master magician of not letting you see what's behind the curtain, even though we know that they're doing these dastardly deeds with raking consumers over the coal. Anti-consumer and Sony seem to be words that go hand in hand. You don't hear anti-consumer practices and Microsoft or Xbox going hand in hand. Again, this is why I find this whole statement to be ridiculous. But I want to get your opinion on this.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of like what's the age bracket for Nintendo games? You got to be this tall to ride the Nintendo games. Sorry, kid. It's a weird PR statement, but I'm kind of getting used to Sony doing stuff like this. I mean, like I said earlier, Bayonetta, not a kid's game. It's on the Switch, and I feel like maybe the deal could be for the next Switch. That's being rumored.
That's what I'm thinking. I think Microsoft is privy to what's coming out next.
The Nintendo platform. He didn't say Switch directly.
Well,
Nintendo platform.
That's that's a good point. I mean, I'm not sure what else that could possibly mean, but
it just leaves it vague, which they're big on because they don't want want to directly commit to things that they don't have to.
I guess I'm saying, absolutely. I guess what I'm saying is I believe it's probably not coming to the current Switch. I believe it's probably coming to whatever the new Switch is going to be because it's a little more powerful. Unless, like you were saying, Boom, with the cloud, just like Resident Evil games that, they could utilize the cloud to push Call of Duty out with probably little to no issues at 30 frames. But I mean, it's typical Sony fodder. I don't have too much to add to, anything that Jesse or Luke has already said. I do kind of agree with Luke a little bit in the regards of, I don't want to paint Sony completely as just the bad guys. I do kind of think the COD thing with the Nintendo is good. It's just PR 101 for Xbox and Microsoft to do something like that. Kind of shoving it, in the regulators' faces. Like it just makes sense to do. I mean, that's what I would do if I'm trying
in
to
the end,
get
they're all
through.
mega corporations, so they're not your friends.
Absolutely. Like I think people really need to think of this stuff logically and stop just picking like Microsoft good, Sony automatically bad. I don't agree with what Sony is doing. I hate kind of Sony as a company and how they run it versus I love Sony games. But I do not believe Microsoft is the good guy either. They're playing a good PR game, and which is also why I think this deal will go through and they will win, because the lawyers are just going to have a field day with every point that Sony has made to try to counter this deal to go through. So yeah,
these companies are good people, but the companies themselves,
yes.
there might be really good people working there. Like Jim Ryan might be a wonderful guy in his real life, but when you're running a business like that, it's not about being nice. It's about constantly growing. That's just how they work.
Yeah, I mean,
you got shareholders, so you have to
look,
increase.
At the end of the day, Retri, we understand this. Like, I don't want it to think anyone for a second that I'm some sort of naive knucklehead that I think that Microsoft is not out to make money for their shareholders who are sitting on potentially millions and millions of dollars. I'm not a boob here, folks. I understand what is happening, but at the same time, we have to. I like looking at this deal or this particular situation from just let's just look at what's on the table and what Sony has done to consumers and the entire industry for decades has been bully-like tactics. You do what we say. If you don't give our game a good review, you're blackballed. We can charge crossplay because we're the market leader. We can raise our prices by $50, which Jesse called unprecedented. It's never been done before in gaming that a console that is coming on its second-year anniversary is always expected to drop $50. Sony, because they're the market leader and they have no fear of losing that, decides, well, we're going to raise it by 50 and it's okay because, well, we're Sony.
And Sony, to be fair, Meta did the same thing with the Quest first.
They absolutely did.
That gave them the confidence to do it as well.
But you know something? And I gave Meta the same business. Okay, I gave Meta the same business because of the as great as the headset is, it's not worth $50 more. If anything, it's worth $100 less. I
think their reasoning is that actually cost them about $700-800 to make, but they were using all your analytical data and everything to subsidize that through your Facebook account. And when they took out requiring a Facebook account, they're like, well, shit, we need to really figure out another way to make some money back because we're not going to be able to sell all your data as easily.
You're right. That goes the
data. It's not great. There's a reason for it, but it's a bad reason.
Again, they're the Dirk Dastardly twirling the mustache. That's Facebook for you, and that's why they are always getting the business from regulators because they can't be trusted. Sorry, end of story. This is, Microsoft and Facebook, yes, two big corporations, two different ideologies, two different levels of trust. I don't trust Facebook as far as I can throw them, and I'm not that strong. And I will say that publicly. But before we get into the next topic, and the next topic is relatively big because this might be the opening that Microsoft potentially needed in the EU and the UK, and we have someone who is from that region of the world, and Luke Steele, who has had many instances where he has closed potentially $1 million deals, and we're going to get his opinion on whether or not the reported investigation into both Apple and Google with their duopoly, if you will, is somehow a way for Microsoft to get this deal passed, because we have a story that they put out there in February, right after this deal, on how open-ended their mobile platform will be. Phil actually said in the interview that we've been referencing that Xbox and Xbox Game Pass are blocked from both of these platforms. You have to get into using these through a browser, as opposed to actually having a place you can just download the app and you go. And Phil Spencer specifically said that then. But before I get into all of that, I gotta catch up on the super chats. There's been so many of them. Drawn TJ, generous friend of the program, drops a very generous $2 super chat and says, "Hi everyone, Sony has messed up. Indeed, they have." We also have, we have another one from a good friend of the program, Brett Bingham, who drops a $5 super chat and says, "Jim Ryan just pulled an AA Ron. He's messed up. Jim AA Ron Ryan." Yeah, he's definitely a clown. I will say that for sure. Tom from Toonami drops a very generous $5 super chat and says, we should play a game. How many bridges can Sony burn before this deal is done? Their own studios, EA, Microsoft, Nintendo. Funny, no Valve snapback though. Yeah, I mean, Valve already said what they needed to say in defense of Microsoft. They don't. They
I mean, wow. I mean, if you think about it, sorry to interrupt, but why Valve wouldn't? Valve is on Windows PC with a completely open platform that has their own payment system inside it because Microsoft allows that. You know what I mean? So like Valve doesn't get any resistance whatsoever from Microsoft in that regards, and they make a ton of money. They make a lot more money because of that. Where Apple and Google, they take a cut of everything.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah. It's going to be an interesting conversation nonetheless, but Kirby Zero Louise, good friend of the program and developer, says this after dropping a very generous $10 super chat. Steam Deck with Windows 11 can run Warzone 2 just fine. Current rumors would have Switch 2 faster than the AMD 6800U, which itself is 1.5 times faster than the Steam Deck, if not even more. They opt for the RTX 40 ARC. Listen, he knows his stuff. I'd love to see the next Nintendo Switch, whatever it's going to be called, be as powerful as the Steam Deck. That would be pretty dope.
Yeah, that would be
but it would also be pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You could expect that would be $400 at minimum, maybe more. And I would be willing to pay that, to be honest with you, because I like my games more than 720p.
I always temper my expectations with Nintendo and the hardware. So I would hope to just get something that can do 1080p docked decently with DLSS. Like if you can have DLSS 3, like the lowest tier or the highest Tegra, lowest, 40 series type thing in there, I'd be shocked. They'll probably have like a low 30 series equivalent or something, and it'll look fine. It'll run 720p in handheld because you don't need more resolution than that for most handhelds that size.
Yeah.
But the main thing is I just hope it has a better solution for docked performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we will definitely see. Only time is going to tell, and I would imagine we're going to get that information hopefully sometime next year. Creative Monster in the chat drops not only a very generous $5 super chat, but it's what they said that is awesome. Want to wish everyone a happy holidays. Mr. Boom, I love this channel. You're great for the community. Also, thank you for your service. That's very, very kind of you to say. I definitely appreciate that. The generosity. I appreciate you supporting the channel with your views, but I also thank you for the awesome commentary. A Finesseful J drops a very outrageous $20 super chat and says, shout out to the panel and the moderators for always taking the time to welcome chat participants. Yeah, I try to when you see I'm not looking at the camera and I'm down, it's because I'm trying to get to everyone. It's my thing. I love welcoming everybody. I want to make sure that you come to this channel and you feel welcomed, but you also feel safe. The boss here in this chat is Lethal Papa. That dude works tirelessly on every show that I do, and I can't do it without him. And he is one of the, again, I say it all the time, he walks silently and carries a very big band stick. So if you're an a-hole, he gets rid of you. He gives everyone a shot, but if you're a jerk, he's going to get rid of you. So I'm shout out to him. Drawn TJ drops a $5 super chat and says, Nintendo doesn't have shooters on Switch, LOL. Then what is Doom and Apex and Fortnite? And what about, I don't know, the best-selling game of the Switch this year, Splatoon 3?
Splatoon, yep.
I don't know. It's a shooter. It just may not be a first-person shooter, but it's a shooter nonetheless. I find Sony's stuff ridiculous. We also have another an additional $5 super chat from Highlander001. He says, let's not forget, Sony's first acquisition was Psygnosis. That is absolutely correct. That was a publisher at the time, which at the time, the size of the Activision deal today, Sony can't take losing being first. And I think really that is the crux of Sony's problem. They do not want to potentially be in second or be in third, which if Nintendo gets Call of Duty and they have a new piece of hardware, Sony could very well be in third place. And you know something? All I can say to Sony is, well, compete. Bring back old IPs like I don't know, SOCOM, for instance, that you could potentially challenge a Call of Duty, but they don't want to do that. Highlander 001, wow, it drops an additional $5 super chat and says, if there is a court battle with all of the documents Activision and Microsoft have on Sony, will not give them will not give them a black eye. It will break their nose. No, I think Sony's dirty laundry will come out, and eventually it's going to make them look like just complete liars. And I think that you can. I don't know for sure, Luke Steele, but if you go out of your way to lie to regulators, I don't know how much trouble you can get into. But if you are misleading regulators with false information, I'm pretty sure you can. There is some legal ramifications for that.
Yeah, there are. It's quite long-winded, but so I won't get into them. But there are.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I know. I can tell you the patrol guide. I can't tell you business law. It's just not my field. So,
but it's not as bad as if you're a third party though. Like Sony.
Oh, okay.
If you're Microsoft or Activision and you mislead, you're in real trouble. But third parties, because third party evidence, at least for the CMA, for example, it's weighted very lowly, so they don't really they don't care that much. I mean, it's somewhat persuasive, but
Okay, all right. I thank you for the clarification because I wasn't sure. Libra X drops a very generous $5 super chat and says, it's strange to see Sony burning bridges when surely they would want their 10 plus gas games in development to also be on Xbox. Microsoft could say no. They absolutely could. Like I find
that's a good point.
I find this whole thing just ridiculous. Like there's going to come a point where people and publishers and developers are going to look at Sony with a side eye. I think there are some major ramifications that we cannot forecast for the magnifying glass that Sony has put on the industry. This is an industry that has been run pretty much unchecked by regulators for decades. And I understand regulators, they want to now they have an idea of what kind of money is coming into gaming, so they're going to be a little bit more into these bigger decisions. But I think it can be said that Microsoft doing this deal should have been business as usual. And I think that what Sony has done, being the only one to really have a problem with this deal, opened up a big problem for the industry at large. I think there is going to be some big ramifications, and I think Sony is going to suffer because of it, because of this ridiculousness. And everything that they have claimed about Call of Duty not coming to PlayStation has been answered, but they still have a problem. It's quite shocking to me. But I do want to move on to the next topic, and this is a big one. This is what I really wanted Luke Steele to give us his expertise, because he's worked against and with the CMA and the EU Commission. Luke, one of the biggest things, at least in our opinions, and we've talked privately, is that Sony has made this whole deal about Call of Duty, but we ultimately, all of us agree, that it is far from just about Call of Duty. As a matter of fact, the most important thing right now is King. King is one of the biggest money makers when it comes to mobile. Mobile is the biggest money maker for gaming. I don't care what console you're on. They make money hand over fist. As a matter of fact, Candy Crush, the game that you don't give a flying F about, makes more money than Call of Duty, sometimes 3-1. So Microsoft does not have a footprint. They don't have a handshake. They don't have a fingerprint in the market, in the mobile market, but they want that. And a part of this deal, Luke, is getting this. Now, we heard recently that the CMA and the EU Commission have major concerns regarding Apple and Google, who have, this is their wording, a duopoly in these regions of the world when it comes to the mobile market. They are the leaders by leaps and bounds. No one can challenge them. Now, there has been some talk that Microsoft, getting a hold of King, is going to run their platforms very, very different from Apple and Google. And this different opinion on
breaking news, Boom. I'm real sorry to break it, but the FTC has announced they are going to sue.
Shocker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
There goes your tax dollars, everybody.
Well, there's that. Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to sue. All right. Well, now this is
They got to lose, too.
They're going to lose. Yeah.
Not without concessions.
Yeah.
Very,
Wow.
very
That's.
interesting.
I mean, it's. Wow. That is. I mean, where do you have that, folks? I mean, Jesse.
I put it in the private chat.
Let me
from,
just pull this up.
Bloomberg.
Let me just pull this up
Yes,
because
it's
this comes.
Bloomberg.
Wow. Okay. Well, this comes the way, folks. I'm going to read it to you live. Unfortunately, we're going to have to. We're gonna have to drop this topic because this is obviously breaking news. FTC to sue Microsoft over Activision Blizzard deal. This comes the way of
Walter at Bloomberg.
Okay, yeah, okay. So I'm gonna pull up who he is. Walter Bloomberg at Delta One. WalterBloomberg.com. I haven't seen this posted. I mean, obviously he has 623,000 followers, so apparently the guy knows his stuff. I'm going to go to his website right now, and I'm going to read it verbatim. I'm actually quite shocked by this, to be honest with you. I did not expect that this was going to happen, but here it is, folks. The FTC has decided to sue to block this deal, and ultimately, like we talked in the beginning, they're going to lose. This is not anti-competitive. I feel that after this, again, I'm at a loss for words. I'm at a loss for words, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to Luke Steele on this. Luke, again, I'm a little taken aback. I thought that Microsoft has done everything for regulators, specifically the FTC. What does this ultimately, this lawsuit, do for the EU Commission and the UK's CMA? Do they look at this and say this is the gotcha moment for these two entities?
Yeah, I mean, my first thoughts on that, and as always, I will defer to Hogue law as to matters of US law. I can only speak from a kind of broad UK European perspective. But what I would say is that look, regulators, particularly the big three, being the Commission, the CMA, and the FTC/DOJ, they like to take a fairly aligned approach in what they will do for mergers and acquisitions that they're investigating that are cross-jurisdictional, like this one. I think the fact that the FTC have come out and are willing to take this to court suggests that the side of the CMA and EU is pretty aligned with that approach. Now, obviously, in those jurisdictions, that's not what happens. There isn't a court case. That's pretty unique to the US. But it does paint a picture, perhaps. And I think, getting back, if we just lapse back a bit to Microsoft's actions over the last week with Nintendo and Steam and what they've been doing, what it sounded to me like was that they were really concerned about regulators at this point. It didn't strike me as a company, an entity that was particularly confident about the direction this was heading. And so perhaps, in the background, they knew that this was coming and wanted to get ahead of it. I'm sure they would have, because they would have had dialogue with regulators pretty consistently. So I can't say for sure that the CMA and the EU will move to block or anything like that. But it does kind of put the whole thing on this slant of regulators have this particular view, and it's going to be quite difficult for Microsoft to remove that view now, or to try and get around it. I'm not saying they can't, because they may offer concessions that are more than satisfactory for regulators, but it's really difficult at this point. Even with my experience, anybody who's worked in competition law, you can't account for what regulators are going to do or think. Sometimes you can only put forward kind of your best argument. I think Microsoft have, and look, from my perspective, I don't think the deal is anti-competitive, but it's really interesting that even after the kind of positive news or the positive context we've had over the last few days about, things like the CWA in America, things like the Democratic panel leaning on the FTC in terms of, the change of votes, etc., that we're still getting, the FTC is still taking this to court. So I find it quite fascinating, actually.
I'm just shared a link to you, Boom. The Washington Post has a bunch more info.
Okay, I'm gonna pull it up right now. Let me just get over there because, like I said, I'm a bit shell shocked, folks. I got to be honest with you. I'm very rarely at a loss for words. Thanks, Jesse, for this. According to the WashingtonPost.com, FTC sues to block Microsoft's acquisition of game giant Activision. The lawsuit marks FTC Chair Lina Khan's most significant effort to date to address tech industry consolidation, and it could upend Microsoft's gaming ambitions. According to the report, the Federal Trade Commission on Thursday sued to block Microsoft's $69 billion acquisition of video game publisher Activision Blizzard, charging that the massive deal would allow for the Washington tech giant to suppress its competitors in gaming. It goes on to say the lawsuit represents the FTC's most significant effort to rein in consolidation in the tech industry since prominent tech critic Lina Khan, who's a Democrat, became the commissioner's chair and was expected to usher in a new era of antitrust enforcement categorized by a willingness to bring cases to court rather than pursue settlements with companies. Finally, it goes on to say the FTC lawsuit against Microsoft would foil the company's ambition to become a heavier hitter in the gaming frontiers. Activision is the owner of the massively popular titles like Candy Crush and Call of Duty, and its acquisition could bolster Microsoft in its competition with Japanese console makers Nintendo and Sony.
Can I ask Luke a quick question? Could this just be a grandstanding, like beating of the chest to sue to equal concessions, or would they try to get those concessions beforehand, or is this something that they feel they have to sue to get those concessions?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter in this case. I think it's
that's what I figured.
The process is a bit multifaceted, but as I understand it, at least in the US, but I think it's kind of, this stage is kind of where the FTC are going, okay, we're really serious about this now, and we want you to offer some pretty concrete concessions. Now, nobody knows what they are right now, right. Like we don't, but that dialogue's gone on. But like in the US, it's a little different because the FTC is the way that body operates in its antitrust laws is I don't want to say politically motivated, but it is motivated in a sense that most of a competition
can say it. We're not going to get angry at you.
Look, it's the US, right? Everything is, like, no offense, but everything is politically motivated in the
100%.
US. And competition bodies in other jurisdictions aren't like this, so that they kind of don't. The FTC has a very, at least in recent times, a very stringent approach to mergers and acquisitions, in that it really doesn't like big ones, and right. Lina Khan doesn't like big tech, as we know, or at least consolidation there. So the chances of the FTC grandstanding like this and really wanting to take Microsoft to, I think what they're trying to do is at very minimum get some pretty significant concessions. Now, as I say, don't know what they are, but yeah. I got
another point I want to bring up real quick. I don't want to go on a tangent or anything, but I find it very odd that the commission itself is supposed to have 5 members, and they have 4 right now, 3 of which are Democrats, 1 is a Republican. So we can kind of, you can kind of guess what side everyone is on.
It's funny you say that. According to the article, it was the 3 Democratic representatives that decided to fight this deal. I'm a
Democrat, by the way. Just get that out there right now. Yeah, so I don't want this to get political. But my point is why is it okay for a commission that's supposed to have 5 members not to have 5 members? Because here's a thing that I learned is that 5th member has to be a Republican. Has to, according to the rules and regulations that happen in the United States. So it's a little suspect that there is no 5th member, or it hasn't got pushed forward when one of the biggest deals in history is going on right now? Why wouldn't you move the process along, President and Senate, to pass the 5th member for this commission when it's such a big deal? And you literally could have been, like articles were saying the other day, a 2-2 tie, because one of the Democrats might have flipped, which obviously didn't happen.
Yeah,
but it's just odd.
Yeah. I guess it wouldn't have mattered in this case because it would have still been a majority.
That's true.
It would have been a majority decision, wouldn't it? It would still have been 3-2.
Now, Luke, being obviously we want to get Jesse Norris's opinion on this momentarily, but the FTC has been losing court case after court case after court case. The evidence that has been provided does not seem like it is going to hold up. I think this is eventually. I don't think this actually gets to a trial. I think a judge is going to throw this out, and I think it's going to potentially. It's going to hold up the deal. This is not getting done by June of 2023. Now that they have decided to sue, this is, like I said, it's very disappointing that millions and millions of taxpayer dollars are going to go on, be used by the FTC to block a merger that has only the best interest of consumers around the globe. Obviously, the workers that were now promised by Microsoft that they would be neutral in regards to getting unions into gaming for the first time ever are now at risk. The fact that a new management could not potentially come to Activision Blizzard that has been run by the devil for over a decade with Bobby Kotick. This attempt to block the deal has such large ramifications just outside of stupid Call of Duty. I think that there are so many angles that are being missed here. What in your opinion? I mean, again, there's no real right or wrong answer here. What are the likelihoods that Microsoft wins this?
Well, that's a big question. Look, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to know because we're not at a court case yet, right? The FTC have voted in favor of making an administrative filing, which is essentially to take it to court. So we're not there yet. So there is some kind of ground to travel before that point, which could lead to the FTC, for example, abandoning this and just accepting some concessions from Microsoft and just going, hey, look, we're not gonna take it to court now. So on you go. We don't know if it goes to court. I mean, again, in the US, it's difficult. It's really difficult to know what that looks like. The FTC have, as you say, they have lost court cases recently. It's a difficult bar, I guess, from a US perspective to clear to show that this, something like this is anti-competitive, unless it actually is. Regulators have a tough job, and I guess, courts have a tough job as well because they have to try and make decisions about things that haven't happened almost. Like they are looking to the future and saying, will this have anti-competitive effects such that it adversely impacts consumers? It's probably the most difficult job a regulator has. And, when you're doing that, you're dealing almost exclusively in hypotheticals. But the problem with hypotheticals is that, for a court, court cases, FTC, etc., you can get in your head that a hypothetical is more likely than another, rightly or wrongly, right? And I think probably the FTC have got in their head that, look, we're just, I think they said, actually, I think Jesse posted something, which is the thing that I was probably most concerned about regulators really focusing on. And the FTC seemed to be pretty cognizant of it, which is harming competition in multiple dynamic and fast-growing gaming markets. And what the FTC are referring to there is exactly what the CMA were referring to, which is cloud gaming and gaming subscription services. And the problem is that when you have nascent markets like those two, which are very small right now, right? Everybody knows those markets are really small, even if you define them as markets, whether you agree with that or not. But if you do, they're very small. Regulators really hate players in that arena becoming so dominant before the market is even formed, whether you think Microsoft are going to be dominant in those markets or not. And I think that's probably what's driven the FTC to this point. They're just really worried about that element. Again, rightly or wrongly, I don't necessarily agree with the FTC. Odds of winning it, like I don't know, but we're not there yet, right? So I don't think people need to sound the panic stations just yet. This is a process; it will rumble on for some time longer, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, I mean, now, again, I reach out to you simply because you have, a good eye for this stuff. You are currently, you have worked, in this field for many, many years of your career. Is there a chance that, how long before an administrative judge takes a look at this and ultimately says, yes, there's enough evidence here to bring forth a lawsuit, or like in recent times, get it thrown out? Obviously there is a shot that an administrative judge in Washington is going to have this come across their desk, and they're going to say whether or not, yes, there is enough evidence for this lawsuit, or there's not enough evidence and this is a waste of time, and throw it out. How long does that process take?
It's going to be a couple of months. At
Okay.
least I couldn't say exactly.
And we're coming into the holidays, so I would imagine there's going to be no movement on this.
Yeah,
for
maybe
at least the middle of the new year.
Yeah,
the
maybe
first month.
Maybe end of January, mid-February. It might move quicker than. I mean, depends on again what happens in the interim period, right? But I would think this will all kind of coalesce around a similar time. I mean, we're expecting the CMA's provisional findings in January, so you might get that concurrent to some development here, but it will be a couple of months.
Wow. Yeah. Well, listen. Let's get Jesse's opinion on this, and we'll get Retri in here, and then we'll get everyone out of here. But before I do, I gotta thank the friendly neighborhood Blue Shell, who dropped a very generous $20 super chat and says, "Not win the war. Sony may lose the war badly with nuclear waste all over the industry when regulators start putting laws for gaming acquisitions and exclusive content. The industry will hate Sony after the court case is done." I think we're going to get some real dirty laundry from Sony, and I think if you think they look bad now, I think they're going to look worse. Tom from Tanami drops an additional $5 super chat and says, "That's why the second Republican left, because Khan didn't listen to the parties and just sued and keeps losing. So they said they didn't want to waste their time anymore on the board." And that is absolutely correct. There was another Republican who quit, who left the position. And according to several people, and I believe Hogue Law actually said this, that the FTC was in no hurry to add the fifth member, which means why. that is very Retri. You're laughing, but it
makes sense.
It calls to question, some maybe fugaziness of the FTC.
That's kind of what I was getting at with Khan.
But you know what? You're on board. Talk about it, brother. Let's get your opinion.
I mean, that is my opinion. My opinion is that there was some, like you said, it didn't seem like they were in a rush to get someone else in there, because that someone else might have influenced maybe one of the three Democrats. We don't know. I mean, we got reports that one of the Democrats was ready to flip. Yes. And you never know what's going on behind the scenes. Like maybe they were ready to flip and flipped back. You know what I mean? And that would have been a disaster for Khan, because she is in a position, a position of power, right? And when one of your side goes against you essentially and what you want, then it shows maybe you don't have as much control over the position, that then you would want, right?
Right.
And I think I'm not too worried about it. Look, I actually always thought the FTC was going to sue. I 100% thought this was going to happen anyways. What I'm trying to understand is, what does that mean? Does it mean it's because they want concessions? I still think the FTC is going to, allow this merger to happen. I'm more worried about the CMA. And I want to ask Luke a real quick question regarding the CMA. It's not like the FTC. So if the CMA basically kind of kills this, it's probably dead. Am I wrong?
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people out there, I see really bad information all the time on Twitter where people are like, well, I know Twitter, right? Let me tell you, if the CMA says, doesn't agree to this, they're just going to get sued. But Luke's here to tell you, no, it's not like the United States. It's a different.
Nothing's like the United States
right.
when it comes to competition.
Exactly.
It's unique unto itself.
Right.
But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation about that. Like, even if, and the same goes for the commission. I think the point that people miss is that the merger agreement between Activision Blizzard and Microsoft specifically says in the first instance that it requires as a condition to completion before it can complete the consent.
Yes,
those
three
regulators, yes. Right, and others, but they aren't specified. If you cannot fulfill a condition precedent like that, you cannot fulfill your agreement. It just doesn't work.
And that's between Activision and Microsoft, not anyone else, right?
So no, that's exactly. That's between no one else. So if the CMA, let's just say the CMA and the EU did tank it, the deal is done.
Right.
It's done. Because not because Microsoft would can't then do other things, because their own agreement with Activision Blizzard says they can't complete the deal.
Now that we got you, Luke, though, can we kill one more narrative? Because a lot of people are also saying, well, if that happens, then they'll just cut ties with the UK. Please talk on that. We're going to stop selling the products for UK and Microsoft Office and everything. Microsoft's just going to lose billions of dollars and pull out of the UK.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, look, exactly. Even if you could get around the merger agreement thing, and even if Microsoft said, CMA in particular, we're just going to pull out of the UK market, CMA would say, fine. First of all, that's Microsoft. Business goodwill is terrible, right? General kind of regulatory goodwill is awful. Microsoft is stained for life for doing that, for completing a deal with, even though a regulator has blocked it. A big one at that. As you say, lots of missed money anyway, even if they could do that. And the CMA can impose pretty massive fines on companies. I think up to, it's 1 or 2% of combined global turnover, which is huge amounts of money.
Huge money.
It doesn't sound like a lot, 1 to 2%, but that's
but for Microsoft it is.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. So people need to stop with that narrative as well. They don't work. The US position is unique because you really get to combat the FTC and try and convince a neutral party, that you're not anti-competitive, that this isn't anti-competitive. So EU and CMA, different thing, but those are really helpful, hopefully. But thank you for bringing them up, because I do see that.
Thank you for kind of bringing down the hammer of those narratives, because I keep seeing them pop up. I'm like,
it's different in the UK and the EU. I'm wondering if ultimately this really does. Again, my concern for the deal is a couple of things. I don't know what happens. I can imagine that Activision stock is tanking as we speak. It's probably tanking literally as we speak. I don't know what's going to happen if this deal does fall through. Does Microsoft, does Activision go in for a fire sale? And at that point, I saw some bad takes. Sony is still going to get marketing rights after this. I don't think they're going to ever work with them again. I'm going to be honest with you. I think 2024, when this deal ends, Sony will never be welcome back into the building, regardless of how big their player base is. I don't think they want to sell. Activision Blizzard King wants to sell. Their reluctance to agree to a deal puts them on the outs with everyone. And I think ultimately, yes, this is going to go through the FTC. Though my concern, Luke, is that the EU Commission and the UK, the CMA's UK, or the UK's CMA, I should say, are going to look at this and say, "Yeah, you see, we told you it was anti-competitive."
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a fair point, and they would have had, they're all in contact with each other, right? There is a big information sharing pool that goes on with stuff like this, so. for the CMA and the EU Commission, this wouldn't have been a surprise. They would have known about this before we knew about it, right? So what I'm interested in is probably the same thing you're interested in, which is is what the FTC are doing representative of the same kind of stance of the EU and the UK in their approach to this, or if it's not, does this embolden them to follow the approach that they outlined in phase 1 going into phase 2? That's the concern if you want the deal to go through. Like, are they now kind of going, oh, look, our friends at the FTC are really adamant that, they think this is anti-competitive. We thought it was anti-competitive in phase 1. We're doing our phase 2 review, and this is kind of like amalgamating over into their views on as they're doing their phase 2 review and kind of influencing it in that way. So it's a fair concern.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, let's get your final opinion and we'll get everyone out of here. But real quick, Highlander 001 drops an additional $2 super chat and says it's going to federal court or internal court. I think it's federal court it would go to, I would imagine. That's the best guess I got for you, brother. I think it would go federal court. A federal judge is going to decide whether or not there's enough evidence to bring this into a trial, or they'll throw it out like we've seen happen to the FTC before. But Jesse, let's get your opinion on this, brother. The breaking news, thanks to you, live on the air, folks. The FTC is suing Microsoft to block this deal.
There's a couple of things reading through it. They say Microsoft decided to make several of Bethesda's titles, including Starfield and Redfall, Microsoft exclusive, despite assurances it had given to European antitrust authorities that it had no incentive to withhold games from rival consoles, which isn't true because they, in their filings, which you can find, they said they will determine it on a case-by-case basis. They never said that everything's going to stay.
From the get-go, they said that.
Yeah. So just from everything I read, just feels bad. Like they just don't actually, they most likely know they don't have much of a case. They just want to, chest thump, get some concessions. Brad Smith has already come out with a quote. We continue to believe that this deal will expand competition and create more opportunities for gamers and game developers. We have been committed since day one to addressing competition concerns, including by offering earlier this week proposed concessions to the FTC. While we believed in giving peace a chance, we have complete confidence in our case and welcome the opportunity to present our case in court.
So, yeah, well, there you go. That's from Brad Smith.
Their case feels real weak from the unbelievably little bit that I know about law. So the main annoying thing is it still probably passes, most likely, who knows, and I don't mind scrutiny on a $69 billion deal. Right. I just wish the scrutiny didn't feel like politicians who don't know anything about it just trying to get a win, which is what always happens. Yeah. So that is our government is entirely about, can I look good in the press and make people like me more versus is this actually worth doing?
Is this good for the people? I can't wait. I cannot wait to see what the CWA has to say about this.
Yeah, it's going to be a bloodbath for sure. Disappointment around the industry for sure. Like I said, this all bounces back to Sony. Again, what I found very interesting is that a $3.6 billion deal that, even though it is leaps and bounds smaller than a near $70 billion deal, guys, was passed almost as quickly as I tie my shoe for Bungie. Like it seemed like a big nothing burger to anyone that Bungie would be acquired. Makers of the original Halo and one of the biggest games right now is Destiny 2. And it was a big nothing burger to regulators for Sony, but it seems to be a big problem when Microsoft wants to become competitive. I just think this whole thing sucks. I think it stinks. I think Lina Khan has overstepped her authority, and I think it's going to be found out in federal court where a judge is going to ultimately throw this out. But we will see. Tom from Tanami actually drops an additional $5 super chat and actually put in here exactly what you just read, Jesse. While we believe in giving peace a chance, we have complete confidence in our case and welcome the opportunity to present our case in court. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for what would again, sometimes you got to, call an audible and do things on the fly. And we started off with Sony's commentary regarding Nintendo, which I find to be ridiculous. And now we have the breaking news live on the air that the federal government is going to sue Microsoft to try to block this deal, which ultimately really does put this deal in jeopardy, especially when you consider that the CMA and the EU Commission have not ruled on it. And obviously, thanks to Luke, we have a lot of insight into that. Tom from Tanami drops an additional $5 super chat and says, Brad really just said, hey, FTC, Sony, y'all ever heard of Sherman's March? I mean, listen, I don't know about that, but I can tell you that I think that they're confident. I'm again, my concern here is what the EU and the UK, the CMA, are going to think about this, because if, like Luke said, they do talk with each other, and if one is saying no, it's hard to imagine that the other two are going to say yes. Unless there is something that Microsoft offered to these two entities on the other side of the planet more than they offered to the FTC. I don't know. This is a developing story. We will be covering this on Breakfast with Boom. Obviously, we have the Game Awards tonight. I think that this news kind of just tanks what the Game Awards is going to do, at least for me personally. But we will be covering that. And Andy B Drumming says Hogue had said, and I actually quoted Hogue this a couple times, you can't account for crazy. But ultimately that has what happened here. But let's get everyone out of here. Luke Steele, sell your brand, brother. Talk about what other shows you want, and if people want to reach out to you and potentially strike up a conversation on this matter, where can they reach out to you on social media?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. First of all, a real pleasure, and I really enjoyed it. You can find me at LukeSteele90 on Twitter, and I'm also on Green Pass Gaming on YouTube, which is a kind of Xbox focused show, but we talk about everything every Sunday, which is on 8 p.m. UK time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And I am also on the Indie Game podcast with the Indie Gamer, which is on once a month on the Indie Gamers YouTube channel. So go and check that out as well. And yes, if you want to talk to me about law, I will charge you, but I will, I have to. But hopefully it'll be helpful for you. So yeah.
Definitely appreciate you being here, brother. Thank you so much. Retry, sell your brand, brother. Talk about Game Pass Daily, where they can check that out.
Sure.
Both on Twitter and YouTube, but more importantly, if they want to strike up a conversation with you on social media.
Yeah. So you can find me on Game Pass _daily on Twitter, Game Pass Daily on TikTok and YouTube. We put out video content, Monday through Friday, all the time, basically everything that has to do with Game Pass, breaking news, all the stuff you guys could possibly want, and maybe stuff you don't want for Game Pass stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. And Jesse Norris from Xbox Era, sell your brand, brother. But where they can check out Xbox Era on YouTube, reach out to you onto the website and check that out over there. And more importantly, strike up a conversation with you on social media.
Yeah, xboxera.com. We got everything there. There's forum.xboxera.com where I help moderate. Another way if you ever want to get in touch with me or anything. I am the reviews editor, podcast producer, forum, jack of all trades over there. We are youtube.com /Xbox Twitter.com /Xbox Era. I will be co-streaming the Game Awards tonight with Soul Blazers and Special Nick. On both YouTube and our Twitch channel, which is the Xbox Era, because somebody has Xbox Era and they won't give it up. But yeah, xboxera.com, you go there. We got links for everything, including the article I wrote during this podcast. And if you want to leave on good terms, Boom, with some good news, they just announced 15 million players now for Grounded. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
How many?
15 million.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, that's. I mean, again, it's the game that continues to surprise a lot of people, and one that was made by a small team. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. We broke records. We had over 600 people here today, which is bonkers.
Nice.
Big thank you to the panel that was here. A huge shout out to all of the major super chats that have come in. Thank you. Every super chat matters, whether that be $1, or 20. Everything is used for the purpose of making this channel better and, of course, giving back in a big way. And we're doing that next Friday, where we're giving away $1,000 in 2 hours, 10 $100 super chat gift cards. And the first 500 are going to go to channel members that are going to be picked from a picker. And the next 500 on the second half of the show are going to be giving out by anyone that is in the chat during the live stream. And that's also going to be done with a picker that we just throw everyone's name in. Whoever picks, it wins. And that's it. And of course, we do welcome in all our international viewers. If you are outside of the U.S., we will get you the $100 one way or another, but it has to be through PayPal. It's the only way that we do it because it protects us. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here on another record-breaking show of the X Vlog Live. I'm your host, Mr. BoomStick XL. This is Double Barrel Gaming. And of course, I'm going to close out the show with something that's important to me. Hopefully one day it'll be important to you. And that's something that my dad taught us when we were kids. And he used to say, Craig, treat others how you want to be treated. And also, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. You live by those rules, son. I can guarantee you're going to have an awesome day. So take care, everyone. And we'll see you next week on the newest episode of X Vlog Live.